Forever 21, the fast fashion giant, they're back in the news again, and not for a good reason. Unfortunately, they filed for bankruptcy again here in the U.S. It's actually their second time in just a few years. And this time it seems like they're actually thinking about just winding down the U.S. business completely, maybe closing stores and selling off assets. It's a pretty tough situation for them and really highlights some of the challenges that a lot of those fast fashion companies are facing right now. If you're finding this deep dive helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more insightful deep dives just like this one. So you might remember that this actually isn't Forever 21's first experience with Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Back in 2019, they went through something very similar, but they were actually able to pull themselves back from the brink thanks to some investors who came in. But this time around, it seems like things are a little bit more uncertain, a little more precarious. They're opting for what's called a dual path process, which is kind of interesting because it lets them explore two different options at the same time. So on the one hand, they're preparing for liquidation sales just in case that's the route they need to go. But on the other hand, they're also still actively looking for a buyer who might want to come in and keep the business running. So this two-pronged approach gives them a lot of flexibility, which makes sense in a situation like this where there's a lot of uncertainty. So what happened? What actually led to this second financial stumble for Forever 21? Well, according to their CFO, Brad Sell, they've been hit by kind of a perfect storm of challenges. One of the biggest ones they've been dealing with is that really intense competition that comes from foreign fast fashion brands. Those overseas companies, especially the ones who get to benefit from those de minimis exemptions, you know what I'm talking about. They can really undercut Forever 21 on pricing, which puts a huge squeeze on the profit margins. And in case you are familiar with those de minimis exemptions, it's basically a trade rule that lets certain goods get imported into the U.S. without any duty as long as they're below a certain value. So this gives foreign companies this big cost advantage. It makes it really tough for U.S.-based companies like Forever 21 to keep up and stay competitive. But that's not the only thing you're dealing with, right? It also had to grapple with those rising costs across the board. Everything from the materials to the labor involved. And these constantly increasing expenses, they just eat away at their profitability. It makes it even harder for them to stay afloat in a market that's already so incredibly cutthroat. And of course, we can't forget about the fact that consumer trends are so fickle. What's hot one day is yesterday's news, the next you know. And when you add in economic challenges that can impact spending habits, it seems like those things have really taken a toll on their core customer base. And they're most likely leading to a decline in sales as well. It's important to clarify, though, that this bankruptcy filing, it only affects Forever 21's U.S. operations. Their international stores, their online business, those are all run by separate licensees. And here's what'll be interesting. The Forever 21 brand's intellectual property is actually owned by Authentic Brands Group. So they could potentially license the brand to other operators even if the U.S. business ends up completely shutting down. Pretty complex situation with a lot of moving parts. This latest bankruptcy filing really forces us to take a hard look at Forever 21's journey. They were founded back in 1984 by a couple of South Korean immigrants, and they really rose to fame quickly, becoming a big name in that whole fast fashion world up there with giants like Zara and H&M. They were known for their trendy clothes or budget-friendly prices, and they just became this major player in the scene. By 2016, they were at their peak with something like 800 stores worldwide. 500 of those were right here in the U.S. Pretty stark contrast to where they are now. And this actually isn't the first time that Forever 21 has had to kind of grapple with this kind of challenge. Their first encounter with Chapter 11 bankruptcy back in 2019 was a bit of a wake-up call. We really kind of exposed some of the potential downsides of a business model. Now, for those who are familiar with Chapter 11, it's like a safety net for companies that are struggling financially. It gives them the opportunity to maybe restructure their debts, negotiate with their creditors, or even sell some assets, and all while they're getting this temporary relief from certain financial obligations. It's basically a chance for them to hit the reset button and try to map out a new path forward. But here's the thing. Chapter 11 isn't a guaranteed fix. It's more like throwing them a lifeline, giving them a chance to regroup and figure out what the next move is going to be. And it's worth pointing out that there are actually several different ways that a company can emerge from Chapter 11. They might successfully restructure their finances and their operations, or they could be acquired by another company. And then in some cases, they might just end up having to liquidate their assets completely. The outcome for Forever 21, it's still really up in the air. And the ripple effects of this whole situation, they're going to be felt not just by the company itself, but by their employees, their creditors, and even the wider fast fashion industry as a whole. Forever 21's, their whole situation, it really highlights this bigger trend that we're seeing in retail. Consumers, they're becoming a lot more discerning these days. They're not just looking for cheap clothes anymore. They want more type lot. They're demanding ethical practices from the brands that they support. So companies, they can't just, churn out those trendy clothes at those rock bottom prices anymore. They really need to be mindful of, their environmental impact, their labor practices, and just their overall commitment to sustainability. And of course, let's not forget about, the huge shift towards online shopping. We had something a complete game changer for the retail industry. It's forced those traditional brick and mortar stores like Forever 21 to adapt or risk getting left behind. And online retailers, they often have much lower overhead costs, so they can afford to offer you more competitive prices, which puts even more pressure on those physical stores. So where does all this leave fast fashion? Is it a model that can actually survive in the long run, or is it just destined to fade away as consumer preferences continue to evolve? The industry's reliance on cheap labor, often in developing countries, that's come under a lot of scrutiny. Lately, consumers are raising some really valid concerns about working conditions, fairer wages, and the ethical implications of supporting brands that seem to prioritize profit over people. And then there's that big environmental question, right? I mean, fast fashion with its rapid production cycles and emphasis on disposable clothing, it's a major contributor to textile waste and pollution. And as those environmental consequences become more and more apparent, consumers are trying to look for alternatives. They want something more sustainable. So Forever 21's struggles, they're kind of like a wake-up call for the whole fast fashion industry. It's a sign that brands need to face these changing realities head on. They have to embrace those more ethical and sustainable practices if they want to stay relevant. Consumers are demanding transparency. They want accountability. They want to know where their clothes are coming from, who made them, what kind of impact their purchases are having on the planet. This means companies need to step back and reevaluate their supply chains, their production methods, and even their overall business model. Notice that the shift towards conscious consumerism, it's definitely a challenge for the fashion industry, but it's also an opportunity. Adapting to these new demands, it might require some significant changes, but it also opens the door for innovation and a chance for brands to really differentiate themselves. The brands that prioritize ethical production, that use sustainable materials, that focus on durable designs, those are the ones that are going to resonate with that growing segment of consumers who are willing to pay a little bit more for products that align with their value. Forever 21's journey, it really underscores how important it is to be agile and responsive in the retail world. And these are constantly changing. Companies need to be able to anticipate those shifts and adapt to changing consumer preferences, economic conditions, and those technological advancements. If they fail to evolve, they risk becoming relics of the past, just a fading memory of a time when fast fashion was king. The future of fast fashion, it's kind of hanging in the balance right now, isn't it? Can it reinvent itself? Can it find a way to address those growing concerns around sustainability and ethical production? Or will it just get overshadowed by, brands that put conscious consumerism at the forefront? Forever 21's second bankruptcy, it's a pretty stark warning for the whole industry. It shows that even those big name brands, those giant, they can stumble and fall if they don't adapt to the changing market and those evolving consumer expectations. Best struggles, though, they offer some really valuable insights for other businesses that are trying to navigate the complexities of the modern retail world. Adaptability, innovation, and a real customer-centric approach, those things have never been more crucial. The brands that can respond effectively to those ever-changing consumer demands, while also embracing those ethical and sustainable practices, well, those are the ones that are most likely to thrive in the long run. If you found this deep dive into Forever 21's situation insightful, be sure to like this episode and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth discussions on current events and industry trends. That wraps up our exploration of Forever 21's second bankruptcy. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world around you.